I learned how to make pots when I was teaching English in high school back in 1963. And it just sneaked up on me. I didn't realize it was changing my life, but it did. Basically because I never found a reason to stop making them. And I had no native ability at all. I couldn't get the clay to stay in the middle of the wheel. So I kept asking my friend, the teacher, the art teacher, if the clay was centered or not. And he was a Quaker, very thoughtful guy. And one day I asked him if the clay was centered, and this is how a Quaker blows his stack. He said, "Jack, if you have to ask, it isn't centered." I thought, oh, okay. So it's a matter of touch. It's a matter of knowing when the clay was centered. And that, I think, metaphorically means that you're centering yourself when you center the clay. So it's something that you never forget. You can pick it up anytime. Lots of people learn how to make pots, and then life interferes and they come back to it later, and all the skills are still there. It's like riding a bicycle. You know what to do. So 6 months after teaching me how to use the wheel, my teacher died suddenly. He got leukemia. And in 1963, there were no really good medications for that disease, and he passed away. So I went into Philadelphia in the evening. I was teaching in suburban Philly, and I took a class with a gentleman on Monday evenings, and I think he wanted to know how much I wanted to do this. And at the time, I was making beautiful little bottles. They were round, they had really nice proportion, but they were as heavy as sin. You could hardly pick them up. And I was responding to magazine pictures of pottery, so I knew what they ought to be shaped like, but I didn't realize that they needed to be a thin wall. They needed to be light. And that's what really takes some skill and practice. And so Louis asked me the central question of my career. Jack, do you want to keep making what you're making, or do you want to learn to make really good pots? Of course, I wanted to learn how to make really good pots. What do you have to do? He gave me 6 balls of clay and he said, throw 6 cylinders. And I was not able to throw a cylinder. Simple little shape, kind of like a tin can. And so the only way you know about them is to autopsy them, and you just cut them in half. This wire's kind of big. Could you get me the smaller wire behind me? So when you see the interior of the piece, it has a kind of architecture. It has a floor and sides. Thanks. And until you can throw a cylinder, you can't really do very much. It's kind of like learning how to write a paragraph. You write a paragraph, you can write a paragraph about anything. But with a cylinder, it can go in so many directions. So you begin to explore forms. And that's just never gotten away from me. It always seems like the same miracle that was happening at the time. So I had a naive interest in this process. And it's just turned into something really marvelous that I couldn't see. I kept on teaching English and making pots. I taught college English and directed the freshman composition program at Juniata College in Pennsylvania. It has about 1,500 students right in the middle of the state. And somehow they let me start a ceramics program there. And so I taught both English and ceramics for 5 years. And then I found that I really wanted to do this clay thing. And so they let me teach part-time. I asked them if I could teach part-time because I wondered how valuable my own time was to me. And I came to the conclusion that time is currency. It isn't just money that's currency. When you have time of your own, you can make things that you know will sell, or you can work on a poem and nobody will pay you a dime for your poem. And you can't ever say, oh, this poem is really costing me a lot to write. It's just in a totally different realm. The poem is important to you to try to make it the best that you can, and you can't equate that kind of currency. So having time, to me, was the kind of currency that justified taking a 50% cut in salary and trying to learn to live cheaply. I built a house and I built a studio without borrowing money by making lots and lots of pots and wholesaling them in the early 70s and loving every bit of it, especially learning to share information with other potters. I didn't find that happening when I was teaching English. It seemed more like a job to a lot of the people, a lot of my colleagues. And so making things was a fulfilling challenge. And that's how it's continued to be. So exploring little forms, little things that you make. As soon as you get the cylinder, you can just change it. And I won't bore you with the details of this thing, but about 90% of all the potter's wheels in the world go counterclockwise. And we know from studying the brain that the left hand is responding to the right hemisphere of the brain and vice versa. And so the right brain is the one that's on the inside, pushing out, making this form come out. And then the left brain, right hand kind of takes over and brings it in. Kind of the way when you play the piano, the right brain is playing all the bass notes, everything to the left of middle C. And if you're playing a guitar, the left hemisphere is the syncopator, and the right brain is making the chord. Don't think about that anymore, but it's exactly what's happening. I just found it fascinating when I was reading about how the brain works and how it works with potters. So little bottles, little forms that go out and come back in again. And you make decisions. Even if you're not going to be a professional potter, just learning how to use a wheel has a lot to do with decision making. Just figuring out what kind of neck it's going to have, where it's going to move? How far in? In the first 2 years of making pots and selling them to people, I had an extraordinary experience in New York City. I was walking down a street, and here on the windowsill of an apartment was one of my pots. How it got there, I have not a clue, but it just seemed astonishing. And you don't confuse your own work with other people's. And so these things, thousands, probably hundreds of thousands of pots now, have gone all over the world. And I know that each time there's a meal, somebody is using one of my pots. Somebody's eating out of one of my bowls or drinking from a cup. Very satisfying thing. So pursuing that kind of interest was important. And I think I learned about that following up on an inner calling. I learned first when I was in college. I had a terrible academic record in school. I was the sub-salutatorian. I graduated next to last in my high school class. But I got to go to college because I was good in sports. If I majored in phys ed, because they had the lowest academic standards for getting in, and I sailed through. And so the second year of it, I was in a tap dancing class with 80 guys, and we're in a gym early, a rainy morning in February, and we're all tap dancing to the Darktown Strutters Ball. And right in the middle of it, I stopped, and this little voice said, "What are you doing with your life?" I thought, what am I doing with my life? I'm not going to be a tap dancer. I'm not going to be a gym teacher. And I walked across the street, and I became an English major. And I began trying out for plays. I began hanging out with theater people. 2 roommates were in the theater, so we got into plays. I started reading more, and teaching English seemed like a really exciting thing to do. And it was, and I enjoyed it. I loved teaching poetry, especially in the spring. Taught American literature. I lived in Bogota, Colombia for a year, taught English in a bilingual school, and then went to graduate school. I was especially interested in the transcendentalists, Emerson and Thoreau and Melville, all those people. What I'm doing here, and it's a passable bottle, but the base of it seems too wide and uninteresting. So if I'm careful, I can trim away a lot of the clay on the bottom and make it smaller, so the whole form acts like it's holding its breath. And that's why I love these forms. You don't have to turn over a form like this and trim it. So smaller foot gives more emphasis to this curve here. And somewhere there's a flower that's going to look good. I have a board over here. Somewhere there's a flower that's going to look good in there, or a few of them. Pottery really affects the quality of our lives. And especially when we make cups. Cups are the most intimate forms that we make because we touch them to our body in two places. We pick them up and we touch them to our lips. People become personally attracted to cups. Everybody, or many people, have a favorite cup. And it's really encouraging to hear from someone who starts the day with one of my cups. So the first cups I made were pretty much like Louis showed me how to make a cylinder. Flatten it out, grab this clay, bring it up so it's shaped like this. And then straighten up the sides. Because I had such low grades in high school, I've always been really self-conscious about my intelligence. And my IQ test, I just barely made it into 3 figures. And one time I told Louis that I thought I made up in persistence what I lacked in intelligence. and Louis said, "But Jack, persistence is intelligence." I thought, here's a guy who knows about diplomacy. Maybe he was right even, but I don't know. So the first cups were mugs. I think if I had not made thousands of mugs, my house might not have a kitchen. It was that direct. I'm going to cut this off just to illustrate something, how the cups came to lack handles. This is not how I make handles. Oh no, this is on video. As nice as cups are and mugs are, they really restrict a person's use. As soon as you have a handle on a cup, you're saying to every right-handed person who picks up your cup, you will drink here. And to every left-handed person, you will drink here. And to every person sitting on the left, this is the side of the mug that you're going to see. I thought this is really regimented. And wouldn't it be nice to drink out of cups that you have to turn around to find out where you want to drink them, to make them truly three-dimensional objects, and to make them have a presence that's different from a cylinder, different from being what you expect to see when you see a cup with a handle on it. So I tried to get some motion in the cups, and I've stayed with those cups ever since. I still make mugs. I like people to relate to what I do without having to take a course in them. But I also freed up quite a bit in making cups, and especially in using cups. Potters in Asia never made handles on cups. Someone said they think that people in the Western world are in such a hurry. They have to pick up the cup and try to drink out of it before the tea is cool enough to handle the whole cup. I don't know if that's true or not, but it made sense to me. And once you start drinking from cups that don't have handles on them, they become more personal. It frees you up to decorate the cup differently so that you're always turning it. It's like a little movie. It's right there. And particularly when they're wood-fired, everywhere you look is the front. So I try to smooth the inside out a little bit. And I like to put some motion in the cup. I like to get the right brain part of the cup involved. So I like pushing out. I like coordinating the inside and the outside hand. One time I did this in New Zealand, and a little voice in the back of the room said, "Can you sell cups like that?" Okay, this is also how you find out what the clay is made of and what liberties you can take from it and deliver to it. So when you pick this up, it's not like picking up something very formal, and you find out where you want to pick it up. What did I do with my stick? Anyway. What are you doing with your life? Oh, thanks a lot. I'll do a couple more of these just to, now that I know a little bit about the clay. So to me, this is more of a three-dimensional object because you can imagine how this feels in your hand. And there's a place where this cup will feel right in any hand after it's fired. And it's also a reminder that this material once had a plastic life, that it responded to touch. And that's one of the greatest things about being a potter, is that there is intelligence at work in our hands. Maybe you're thinking, can you sell cups like that? So all these little nuances on the plane, the edge of the form, they're going to inform what happens to it during a firing. You can put a certain kind of glaze on here and it will just emphasize, it'll accentuate all those little marks. So that only adds to the tactile pleasure of turning it around and finding out where you want to drink from it. I'll just do one more of those, little one. I stopped teaching in 2005. I really miss daily contact with the students and seeing what they're doing. And It's a remarkable thing to be teaching a subject where you can see the results of originality and people coming to trust the original part of themselves and finding some means of expression that can be meaningful to them. How did salt glazing originate? Salt glazing happens when you fire a kiln to a high temperature and throw salt into it. The salt disintegrates and it creates a vapor on the pieces. And there are a lot of colors and textures that you can get doing that. And my book went over well, and I read it and I liked it. And I also discovered I'd lost my passion for it. A very peculiar feeling. So I was walking around in a flea market one day, and I found a wood-fired pot that had fallen over in the kiln, and the ash had landed on it and melted, and I thought, this is really lively. This is very different. It's out of the direct control of the potter, but it looked like what the jug wanted to be like. And so I began learning about that. And I wrote a book about wood firing, but there are just so many variables involved in it that I'm still at it. And I love the communal aspect of it. I don't know any place in the country that's as focusing as Trevor's place. There are just so many of us out there working together, getting to know each other, having a common interest, and doing original work. It's really a blessing. There should be more places like that. Franchise it. So the things that we appreciate change over time. It just is more appropriate for me to make a cup that has some tactile quality to it. I think one of the greatest compliments you could get as a potter is to have your work enjoyed by blind people who negotiate with their cups, their bowls, the things that they eat from by touching them. This winter, the birds ate nearly 40 pounds of suet. I often watch them peck and then convert a phantom steer's insides to flight, to feathered warmth a winter's night could not snuff out. Then I drove to class and showed you how to give shape to energy with a potter's wheel, torquing our planet's flesh lump after lump into cups and bowls by the dozens. We gave them form, color, fire, energy. Can you feel in a teacup's shape that friction of change, the combustion of one thing becoming another? He likes the attic of an aging house. His fingers make a hat above his head. His pulse beat is so slow, we think him dead. He loops in crazy circles half the night among the trees that face the corner light. But when he brushes up against a screen, we are afraid for what our eyes have seen. For something is amiss or out of place when mice with wings can wear a human face. It's a great campfire poem for kids. It's an overview of being a potter that might be worth hearing. You can get so involved in details that that you lose the big picture. This is a short poem about the big picture. This is called Containment. I have picked up, moved, shaped, and lightened myself of many tons of clay. And those tons lifted, moved, and shaped me, delivering me to this living space I wake and move about in. Space perhaps equal to that I have opened and enclosed in plate, cup, bowl, jug, jar. I'm thankful no one ever led me to the pit I'd helped to make in earth or showed me all the clay at once. I'm grateful no one ever said, there, that heap's about 150 tons. Go make yourself a life. And oh yes, here's a drum of ink. See what you can do with that. I wouldn't have known where to begin. Thank you.